Hello and welcome to Console Shock Retro and Modern Gaming Chat with me, Trev, and as always, Stu. How's it going, Stu?
What up, T-Money? It's the S-Dog here in the house.
What?
Oh, that made me laugh.
S-Dog.
S-Dog. Dog in the house. And, yeah, so I came onto here and Trevor, instead of calling his name Trevor, he's T-Money. So I thought I'll be S-Dog on our streaming software.
Pretty flabbergasted by that, and it kind of took him aback. And then he thought, well, if you're going to be called some crazy name like that, I'm going to rename my name. And he bloody did. And that's what he come up with. So he is S-Dog today. I mean, we don't want to, we've had problems before where I've said your whole name on this podcast. It's been a while since I've done that. And obviously, dox you again. Do we really? I don't think anything, well, you haven't mentioned it to me, but I don't think you've been scammed or anybody's turned up at your house and said, I'm your biggest fan and you've got like a stalker or something. I don't think anything like that has happened as far as I know.
Nothing has happened, no, but I mean, if people, get out of their way, I'm sure they can work out what my surname is.
Potentially, yeah.
If someone really wants to know, it's out there in the world, but yeah.
But yeah, we're not going to give anyone the tools to sort of speed that process up.
No, exactly.
Internet personalities these days, so we have to be careful with that stuff. But anyway, enough about stalking, which is something we don't really cover on this.
No,
maybe we should. I don't really know. But
do you reckon there is a podcast out there for people, aspirational stalkers who really want to get into stalking? And is there a podcast for that? I don't know. I don't think there should be.
If it exists, there is a podcast of it. It's kind of that's the rule of the internet, isn't it? I guess
exactly.
Like if it exists, there is porn of it. It's kind of the same kind of deal as that, I think. So it wouldn't surprise me. It wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, we don't talk about that stuff normally. We talk about like Nintendo and Sega and Rogalese and Microsofts and all that stuff, and that's what we're going to talk about. Very specifically, though, this time we're going to talk about Microsoft because they're just kind of torpedoing their kind of console, career. Since 2001, they've been involved in them old consoles, video games. Well, they've had video games out before then, actually. I remember playing some like janky sort of Microsoft video games in the, Windows 3.1 and 95, and they had controllers like the Sidewinder and things like that for the PC in the 90s that were kind of cool, actually. Look up the Microsoft Sidewinder. Looked very much like an Xbox controller ended up looking. But they dabbled with it a little bit in the 90s.
I mean, they did like Flight Simulator, didn't they? And lots of simulator games, Age of Empires, stuff like that. So they've been in the game. Golf, yeah, that's another great one.
You'd always get, there was like in the mid-90s, if you got like an IBM Aptiva desktop PC, which is one of those nice all-in-one kind of, you got the monitor, the unit. You'd still pay about 999 quid for it. But you get a half-decent PC, 486 or a Pentium, and you'd have to get a big bunch of CDs with it, wouldn't you? You get the install disc of whatever OS is on there, like 3.1 or 95 or whatever, but you'd always get like Microsoft Golf, Microsoft Encarta. You'd get all this stuff included. You'd have to go and, get your own joypad or whatever later on. But, yeah, that's kind of where I remember them starting off, really. But obviously the Xbox happened in the, right at the beginning of the 21st century. And really, they sort of fumbled big time with the Xbox One, kind of before it was released, with the whole, talking about the new Xbox One, and it was really just TV, and media, and the game side of it wasn't really emphasized, whereas PlayStation, doubled down on that. And then they sort of, did silly things around secondhand games and rights management that, again, was an own goal and just gave Sony even more ammunition. And they pretty much got destroyed in that generation. They toddled on, they survived it. They sold more than the Wii U, which, you know, isn't that nothing to get excited about, really, is it? But they just about survived. Maybe they felt they could have another crack at it in the current gen that we're in with the Series X, but it hasn't really panned out like that, has it, Stu?
No, I mean, I've got a Series X, and I think it's an absolutely smashing machine, and I'm very impressed with it, and I'm really into the Xbox sort of ecosystem on my PC, on my Xbox as well, and it's a little bit sort of disappointing, and you know, sort of what's happening, because I like sort of how it all works, and you know, the achievements and so on, and Game Pass is a big sort of selling point for me. And you know, I'm generally every couple of days I'll have a look. Oh, what new games are on Game Pass? And I've discovered some absolutely amazing games that I potentially wouldn't have purchased, and I've actually sort of really enjoyed. And they might just be little indie games that they've been you know, put onto the service, or they might be actually, oh, this is a, you know, really big you know, games like something like Call of Duty or something I've really got into this year. So it's I think that's a sort of a great service. The Xbox is an absolutely sort of super machine, and it's just a shame sort of the route that it's going, and I want to be sort of positive about, you know, obviously they've got a plan, and you know, I'm sure in this podcast, this episode we'll talk about, you know, potentially what is the plan for the system, on actually how are they going to, you know, claim back market share or claim, you know, some sort of win. And I mean what triggered all of this was sort of you know, news this week, or maybe potentially last week, about huge redundancies, and what, you know, sort of surprised me was, you know, that actually the game division Xbox, you know, they're very profitable, and you know, with Game Pass, and that's you know, I think they've created something really good there, where, you know, they're profitable. You know, I perceive it as good value, and then hopefully the you know, the game, you know, the people that make these games are, you know, what's the word, you know, fairly compensated for when, you know, games come on to Game Pass, and obviously they wouldn't agree to put them on there if they weren't, you know, fairly compensated for that. So hopefully it's a win-win for everyone, but I'll be interested to see sort of what happens in the future, but maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later on.
Yeah, there's obviously been, you know, the not very pleasant news, but all of those, you know, people that have been let go by Microsoft. I mean, literally numbers, or the Xbox division, you know, really numbers in like the multiple thousands, which is an incredible amount. Obviously, it's a bit, you know, for me, or for both of us, people that live in the UK, where you've got pretty decent redundancy sort of laws, and you're not going to be left kind of drowning, really. You know, you'll get something to keep you going for a little bit. In America, I think you could potentially just be let go, and that's it. You know, you don't get any pay or redundancy money or anything. So a lot of people potentially, you know, they're going to have further issues, you know, stem from the fact they've been let go, which is not a pleasant thought. So obviously our thoughts are with those people. Hopefully they can find something. But yeah, I mean, it says something as well about some studios that Microsoft have bought have been closed, and it's kind of like the kiss of death, really, if you're a studio that gets bought. I mean, you would obviously just tell any kind of an indie studio or a smaller studio, if they're sniffing around you, well, probably don't do it, because you're going to end up being, you know, you'll be thrown into like the Call of Duty mines or something else that you don't really want to work with, and all of your autonomy will be gone, and then eventually you'll be found to be unprofitable, or the game that they got you to make didn't sell quite as much as they would have liked, and you'll get shut down and everything will get made redundant. But I could see that, well, it's probably not always the people that do the work in the mines there that actually, you know, do the lot of the donkey work. It's probably the people, you know, the shareholders that are the ones that accept an offer from Microsoft because they know it's going to end up with them getting a bit of a windfall. Not in every case, but I'm sure that's a big factor for some companies. They've got to get swallowed up. But yeah, you get swallowed up and you get sort of spat out again, and that's happened again. And they've never really had smooth sailing with the Xbox division. I mean, they obviously they've never really won a generation, to be honest. You could put a bit of an asterisk on the Xbox 360 generation because it didn't really sell at all in Japan, whereas in Europe and America it sold very well and was, only very narrowly beaten by the PS3, having kind of been ahead of it for most of that generation. It's like the same argument I used for the Mega Drive. As much as that was quote unquote beaten by the Super Nintendo, and I know there'll be Super Nintendo fanboys will be screaming at me now. It won, but the Super Nintendo won because the Mega Drive sold bugger all in Japan. Had it sold, like the PC Engine, and even to that level, which was, not enough to beat Nintendo. They couldn't do it either, but it was better than the Mega Drive. And then you totaled all the worldwide, amounts up. The Mega Drive probably would have come out on top because it was very, sold tons in Europe and tons in America and Brazil. So it was the same with the 360 for Microsoft, but they were never able to really crack Japan. I don't think that was ever going to change. The original Xbox was kind of a lamb to the slaughter a little bit. It kind of got their foot in the door of the games business, and obviously there was hardcore iron Xbox. There was enough of a fan base there for it to be, a worthwhile venture, and ultimately it was almost like a beta test, really, for the Xbox 360. They had some success with the Xbox 360, screwed up the Xbox One. It toddled on, but they screwed it up, and now, they haven't done anything majorly wrong with these series consoles, but they're just kind of a Sega scenario, really, where people lost faith in the brand, and people didn't buy the subsequent systems. I mean, they've kind of survived longer than Sega ultimately did after the Mega Drive. Sega absolutely nosedived. As soon as the Saturn didn't come out of the gate, with sales through the roof, it was the fate of it was pretty much sealed at that point. And I don't think the Dreamcast was ever going to defeat the PlayStation. So their fate was kind of sealed from that point on, really. When their fate was sealed, when they started releasing the 32X. They could have survived the Mega CD on its own. We've argued that, haven't we, in the past? And they obviously took a nosedive, and thankfully they're still around. They're still making games. The third party, we're grateful for that. But it looks like the Xbox is kind of, like I said, there was the presentation that Sarah Bond did, who's one of the senior, I think she's like one of the senior VPs or some kind of a VP at Microsoft, kind of in Phil Spencer's, circle of people in control of Xbox. It seems that they're looking to basically just kind of be the gaming branch of Windows, as opposed to a console that people buy and they're then locked into that console the way you lock yourself into Nintendo, or you plant your flag on the PlayStation brand or the Switch brand, or people like us, we don't really stick to one way of doing it. We have, if we can afford it, you grab more than one console when you're a grown up. But it looks like Microsoft are kind of moving away from that. I mean, they are apparently going to release a new console, but the Sarah Bond presentation is very telling because all the video that was released, and it's only a few minutes long, and there's nothing, there's nothing particularly, doesn't announce any one thing, but she's mentioning about how it's going to be, we're going to really push forward with Windows, gaming on Windows, and Xbox being on Windows, and I think. It's basically her saying, look, we're not going to have consoles anymore. We're not going to have a nice custom-built box that you fit under your TV in the traditional sense, and it will just run the games that are designed for that box. We're moving away from that. We're going to basically give you a modified PC, which runs a cut-down version of Windows that will run PC games, and obviously it's going to have some kind of translation layer to run Xbox 360 game, everything that the current Xbox is back compatible with. They need to try and get that to work on whatever this weird Windows Xbox is going to be. What are your thoughts on what the next Xbox is going to look like?
I still think they will come out with hardware, but what it will be is it will become what they'll do is almost release, like Nvidia does. So Nvidia, they'll make their reference graphics card, for example. So they'll say, here's the 5070, the 5090, the 4070, whatever it is, and they'll go, this is it, okay? So then lots of people will come out and make that graphics card. So then I think that's what because we're talking a lot about AMD, so it would say, well, here's going to be the next Xbox. So this is going to be a reference sort of design. So you might buy, the reference one made by Dell, the reference one made by HP, or the reference one.
Stu.
Yes, mate.
You're talking about the 3DO. You're basically doing the 3DO here, right?
Well, I think there might be some truth in that. So the point is that they'll make up all these sort of different reference consoles, or maybe this is what I'd like to see, and they'll all run, Windows for gaming, which will hopefully be some sort of front end, like Steam Big Picture or something like that, and then they'll have to be up to a certain level, and then that will be the next Xbox. So the whole idea is, once you have that, you can then obviously sign into Game Pass, you can purchase games through the Microsoft Store, purchase games through the Steam Store if you want, or through the Epic Games Store. And this will be a box that's designed to be, used on your desk, that will be designed to use underneath your TV. And instead of having, because you've got to think that all the references you made to, Sega. Well, no, it's completely different to Sega, because Sega didn't have another division which was that had 90% of the operating systems in the world. So every computer, pretty much all over the world, will use Microsoft Windows. And obviously you can say, well, there's Apple OS as well, and there's Linux over there, but 90% of people actually are using Microsoft Windows. So it seems a little bit odd to have this completely separate sort of system called Xbox, which is over there, which actually, plays games really well, has a great UI, and then you've got Windows over here, which, people might not like this, but it's a great operating system, but actually, for gaming, it needs to be a little bit more simpler. I think that's fair enough to say. So I think that's what they're going to be doing, and then they'll have a reference model for a portable machine. They'll have a reference model for. They might have one that's this is the basic one, then this is the pro one, and then people come out and go, okay, well, I'll do that, but I'll put 3 gigs of storage in mine, or I'll do another one, and I'll I'll have a much higher, what's it, TPI, or I don't know if that's the right term, so more power going into TDP. So I have enough sort of more power going into it, and then I'll have another one with better cooling, and then people can sort of evolve them. And so rather than, so you'll have that machine, so you haven't got to go, okay, well, if I get a PlayStation, I can only buy games from the PlayStation Store. But actually, if I buy this console from, or this, so-called computer from Microsoft, I can then get all the free games from Epic, get all the sale games from Steam. I can do Game Pass on that, and it'll actually be a really sort of nice little system. If I was them, that's what I would do. I don't know if they're going to do that, but I think that would be a really good sort of business model, and then have some small chip in there or some bit of software so you can play all of the old Xbox One and Series X games and so on.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much spot on how I envision the future of Xbox. But the questions that arise from it, which I'm sure they're trying to figure out on their end as well. I mean, the idea that a console is something that you subsidize because you have a custom like motherboard essentially with all the bits on it. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how they work it out from a subsidized model, because before with consoles you get someone to design the entire system for you, and then you bundle it into a little box, and then you sell that box at a loss. So it's cheaper for the consumer to buy them. and then you get the money back on the licenses from companies, video game developers and publishers from releasing games for it, and that's how you get your money back. And that I'm not sure how that works if you're doing it in a more PC derived way, because Microsoft might well be able to build their standard Xbox gaming box PC. They might be able to get a deal where they can subsidize that device to a degree, like Valve have done with the Steam Deck. They've obviously got a deal on. They obviously realise that they can't really sell it for how much. I don't know if everybody's put like a list of prices on how much it actually costs them to put that device together, but I'm sure it costs more than what they sell it for. But Valve know you're not locked down to the Steam store, but most people are probably going to primarily use the Steam store to get their games, and that's where Valve will obviously kind of claw back the money that they're losing on Steam Decks. And it seems to be worthwhile. I mean, I think it looks like they're happy to continue selling Steam Decks. And whether we get a Steam Deck 2, people were fairly confident that's going to happen. So it seems to work for them. So I guess if Microsoft can do that, make a box that's got, some kind of a standardized PC hardware, it'd be interesting to see how much they can realistically sell that for if they're able to get it subsidized to get people to do it. And then, like you say, there'll be other manufacturers will be able to build their own devices that are compatible with that spec, but also have better graphics cards and things like that. They won't be subsidised. That'll just be like buying a random PC. But they'll be Xbox certified or something, so they'll play all the games. And if you want a bit more power, you can go to those guys and buy those systems. But Microsoft will probably sell like a base level unit, and possibly they'll also sell a handheld version of that. So there'll be a couple of units that they'll sell. And then probably you'll see PC games will have a standard, default settings that are designed to aim for those Microsoft base
exactly.
Windows, Xbox consoles, but then, the other problems as well is Windows itself. I mean, how are they going to seamlessly integrate playing those PC games? It's interesting because if you have a Windows Xbox, whatever it ends up being called, you've got more options in terms of gaming than anyone. You can even play some PlayStation games, the ones that Sony have put on the PC. So they'll have an advantage over a PlayStation. Obviously, you won't be able to have any Nintendo games. You're locked out from them even, can't talk, as just as Sony are. But yeah, you've kind of got the best of all worlds, really. And then your Steam games will just be there, your Epic Store games. How those will integrate into some kind of streamlined SteamOS style Windows will be interesting. And how can they make Windows so seamless, and the use of EA Play and an Epic Game Store and Steam, can they make that so as seamless as going on the Xbox Store or on an Xbox? I'm not really sure how they could do that to the point where your casual gamers will be happy to navigate it and won't have to have any.
I'm not sure, Trev. Is a lot of things to sort of overcome to make this the sort of the perfect sort of box. But to tackle some of the sort of points there you made was, I mean, sort of thinking about. I mean, there's sort of the boxes, and what I sort of envisage, that it would be for example, Microsoft might own the chip, for example. So you might, all these other people they'd be sort of purchasing the chip. So that will be what's it called? So system on a chip or whatever, which will have the graphics and the processor all in, and then you must show that you must have a certain amount of memory. So the pricing's that's all they've really got to sell is these chips to other manufacturers, and they might make their own machine. But from their point of view, it can still be a subsidized machine. For example, these chips could be sort of subsidized and then sent out to Asus and all these other different people, and then that comes down to Microsoft. I don't think they're too fussed about actually making sort of too much money or even making any money with the consoles or the chips, for example, because they're going to be making all of their money from people buying, for example, Game Pass, people buying points on COD. That's how they're going to, making sort of their money, and they might be selling official Xbox merchandise as well. So there's going to be lots of different routes for them to make money, and it almost seems a little bit, after the earlier conversation about layoffs and stuff, and I sort of echo what you're saying. It's awful for these people sort of laid off, and I really hope that they will get other jobs sort of pretty quickly. But I think there's lots of sort of scopes there for getting other sort of money in to make these boxes pretty affordable, and I mean it should be really be left. And if you've got a PC, for example, then you can put Windows into gaming mode, and away you go. You're playing Xbox, you're playing Windows gaming, however it's going to be sort of branded, and I think it's going to be sort of quite an exciting opportunity. That's sort of really sort of my thoughts about it, and
I think they're going to struggle. Yeah, I think they're going to struggle to. I'd be interested in how they handle the Windows environment. How they're going to make it so it's just as easy to navigate on what is essentially a PC with sort of a custom version of Windows. Easy to navigate as using a PlayStation or the current gen Xbox, and as well as being able to run regular PC games. Is it going to be easy to deal with them? I mean, there's launchers still with things, and how are you going to get people? That'll confuse the hell out of people that are used to just a console experience. How's it going to do that? Is there a way it'll skip through that for you somehow and set it up for you? How are you going to, go to the Steam store, control that with a joypad? The Epic Game Store, how are you going to go through all of these? I mean, I could see how they could make a UI that would that would make it easy to navigate the Microsoft Store. Obviously that's their store. They can customize that, and Windows itself. But in terms of making all that other Windows PC gaming stuff integrated into this next gen hybrid Windows PC Xbox device, it'll be interesting to see how they handle that, and it's and manage to have it all working, like I said, in a way that makes it just as easy to use as any games console right now. And the pricing, like you said, you could be right there. They could, if they do come up with a system on a chip that is does everything they want it to do, and is they said a couple of years ago now that the next console that they bring out will be a huge leap in power. That's obviously whatever this system on a chip is going to be. They'll be able to work out deals for Dell and Asus. Say you can go and make an Xbox as well. Here's the deal that we've got on this system on a chip, or we'll give you certification programs so your PCs, you can build PCs that are Xbox gaming ready. And obviously Windows will have to be completely toned down as well if it is going to sit in a box under the TV. It can't be telling you that you need to update Teams and sign up to OneDrive and have all these things pop out at you like it does in the taskbar and the start menu. You shouldn't see any of that. No. I mean, it'll probably make a desktop Windows available to you, because it would be a selling point. You'd be like, well, it's a gaming console primarily, but you can use it as a PC as well if you want. I don't think they should lock that out completely. Yeah, I don't think they should lock out Windows completely.
I mean, the whole thing is, it's the way I sort of picture it is, you've kind of got, you go into Windows for gaming, Xbox gaming mode, and then you hit a button, and then you can go back into standard Windows mode. But then it could be, we don't advise playing games within this mode because more resources are going to be taken to run Windows. So it might be a little bit of like, don't play games in there. Go into into this mode, and it can be really sort of quite clear. But then actually it can be like, hold on, I want to look on the internet, I want to, play around the spreadsheet or whatever, or do some video editing. And actually I can do all of that. It'll have mouse keyboard support. So, it could be a PC, there could even be like a physical switch actually on the box. So it will then go into, a gaming mode, and then sort of the UI would change. I mean, there's lots of options, but I think I may have said this before, but it's going to be, with PC gaming, and there will be difficulties in that, and the launchers, playing the old games, updating with patches. Things like that are going to be difficult. But then if you look at what's it called, Steam, and that has, that's overcome a lot of these things. But I still think for it to be a console, it still need more work to do. But Microsoft still have a lot of staff who a lot of very clever sort of programmers and UI designers. They've got huge sort of battle chests of money. One of the largest companies in the world. That they should be able to go, okay, this is our vision, this is what we want. Let's work really hard to get this done. And they should be able to overcome these things. And will they do it in the first instance? Probably not. Will there be problems? Yeah. And if you think about actually, what the UI for the Xbox 360 was on day one, with the blades, and then what was it after 5 years? It was night and day. It changed so many times, and actually became a lot easier to use, and so on. And fingers crossed that they'll be able to sort of deliver on what we're promising they will do.
I think SteamOS, we keep talking about it, but that obviously has shown the way forward for consoleizing a gaming PC. Making it a console-like experience. But even then, you still come up against issues, especially mainly when you're playing older games. Things that are potentially from the sort of last gen, the PS4 gen. PC games tend to be a bit better with how they handled, navigating menus, and controller support was fairly standard on everything, apart from just outright strategy games that you would never want to use a joypad on anyway. But anything earlier than that, even sort of the 360, PS3 era, you're going to be hit with a launcher. Not necessarily from a store it's from, you bought it on Steam, so you wouldn't have to deal with that anyway. But the game itself might just have a launcher where you set the graphics settings, and you've got to jump to a mouse-driven interface to deal with that. Steam obviously lets you, do a button combination to be able to use the trackpad and have that be the mouse. So, but there are people where that's already a bridge too far in terms of ease of use. So how would Windows handle those kind of issues? Would it just lock that stuff out? And it will say, from this point, basically anything before this new generation, PC games need to be, PC games will be made a lot more user-friendly, and a lot more developers will need to be conscious that they've got this Xbox platform it needs to work on. And anything older than that, it will just be, you just play the Xbox Series versions, or you just play the Xbox One versions going further back. That'll be all you'll have access to. And even that'll be interesting, because obviously the current Windows PC, when you play a quote-unquote Xbox game, you're not really playing an Xbox game, you're playing a Windows game that happens to be on the Xbox as well. When you download FC25, you're playing the Windows version of that game. Maybe your save will come across from the Xbox version, but the actual program, the application itself, is a Windows application. It'd be interesting to see, what they develop to get Xbox Series games running, and then going further back when obviously there's amateur level Xbox 360 emulators on Windows, but obviously they'll have the resources to develop something. They'll need to develop something that will play however many. I don't know how many 360 games run on the series, like a few hundred. So they'll need to come across as well, and they've got.
Is that going to be a big deal? Now, obviously, I'm pro backwards compatibility, but I mean, when we're sort of listening to you, then I was sort of thinking more about the Steam Deck verification service, and then. Yeah, so
the issue why they would need to focus on that is because all of these 360 games are on Game Pass, so they're going to have to make them run on whatever this new platform they're developing is, because people will be up in arms. If I can't play Peggle anymore because you're on this new Xbox. So most people, they want to the casual, semi-casual, semi-hardcore gamers, they want to still pick up their console. Aren't going to understand that. Well, it's a different CPU architecture, and they know. I don't care about that. I want to play my Peggle.
I think getting the Xbox One, Xbox Series X games will hopefully be sort of quite simple because they're using a very similar AMD architecture. I think the 360 stuff will be a lot harder. We'll have to go through some sort of emulation sort of layer. But go back to my original point is, there'll be a verification sort of service or option. So you go on there and, much like when you're buying a game for the Steam Deck, and if you're in the Steam sort of world, and you would sort of say, well, is this compatible with Xbox, and from that you would then sort of purchase that game, and obviously anything that would be on the Xbox store would be sort of compatible with the Xbox. So then that because you go on to good old games, and there's so many sort of like really old games that have don't really work with keyboard. They need a mouse. It needs certain drivers. It needs to take you into DOSBox, and I think having a lot of that older stuff not work through the game part of it would be totally acceptable.
Yeah,
that would be 100% acceptable. But then you can still. You've still got the, let's go onto the Windows side, and then you could go, okay, well, I'm going to be on the Windows side. I want to pay Lure of the Tempest through DOSBox. I want to pay something where I need to, download a patch to get it to work and do. Well, you could do that through that way, but that's going to be a little bit more complicated. But then any PC gamer should be able to, work that out. But actually, a console gamer, I'm not saying they're stupid, but they need a slightly easier route, because that's why they've chosen, the Xbox sort of family of machines. So that's kind of what I'm sort of thinking, some sort of verification system, and then actually having a bit of a cut-off point of how far are you going to go back, because so many games, you go on there and on a PC game, and you go on there and it comes up, this is best with a controller. And it has a big, here's a picture of a controller, and then you turn your controller on, press A, and then, actually, I'm not playing a PC game here. I'm playing a console game. I'm playing a controller. And then you just, you press A, you're jumping around and doing whatever you're doing, and you're enjoying the game, and that all sort of seems to work sort of quite seamless. But it'd be interesting to see, what their next plans are.
Yeah, it's really good points about how, the static you might come up against when you're playing old games. What they might do is, this is our Xbox Windows, consoleized, whatever it's going to be. In terms of, the games that are coming out from this gen, you just put the disc in. If there's a disc, it might not be. Or
there won't be a disc. There will not be a disc.
Code in a box.
There won't even be boxes. There's not even shops to buy the boxes from.
Exactly, yeah. You just spot on there. But whatever way you get the current gen of a game from Game Pass or the Xbox Windows Store hybrid that they'll have to make, You just download it. There's not going to be any launcher. There'll be no stupid menus. It will just be like bang, and it'll work. And you'll be able to play all of your Xbox Series games. You'll be able to put the disc in for those, and bang, and it'll work. No screwing around with menus or anything. Same with Xbox One generation, and they'll get 360 games and original Xbox games, whatever's on Game Pass. They'll get all of that working, and it will be the same experience that it is when you're doing it now. And the other side of it is, this is obviously a Windows PC now. We hide everything when you're in, gaming mode, and it acts just like an Xbox. But you will be able to go on Steam. You'll be able to go on Good Old Games. You'll be able to download Mega Race on Good Old Games 50p. But you're on your own. You can try and get them. They might just work straight up in the sort of in the gaming mode version of Windows. You might get hit with a launcher. If that happens, you need to do this button combo on the the Xbox whatever new controller it will be to bring up a mouse cursor and fiddle with stuff. You can plug in a mouse and a keyboard, to deal with that. But we're not gonna go out of our way to make. We obviously can't really go and speak to Good Old Games and even Steam or Epic Games and tell them to make everything they sell work absolutely, perfectly with our brand new Windows Xbox, because that's just not feasible. There's people buy DOS games on Good Old Games. There's not really any way you could make them work any better than they already are.
Exactly, and then I always sort of think.
But you can leave that. You can leave it if you're not into that. You're just a casual gamer. You can ignore all that. Staying within the Game Pass, bubble, and just or the Xbox bubble. But otherwise, you can kind of like the Steam Deck. Then really, you can buy the games that are just approved and just work like that. There's very little static to deal with. Or you can be more like me and you, where there are funny little things we like to try and do and get working. We've got to download compatibility patches, and we'll go into desktop mode and move files around, and we can do that if we want to.
I think if you were to buy a brand new PC, like if you were to go out and spend £1,000 on a PC with a nice graphics card in, an up-to-date processor, and then, you put Windows 11 on, and then you think you could play games from 10, 15 years ago easily, I think you're going to be a little bit mistaken. And I'm not saying, obviously, it's not impossible, but, for one, where to find them, and Good Old Games is a great place. But even old games on Steam, they're still available, but you still have to go through a process to patch them and things like that, and download bits and bobs for them to work. And then even if you get them working, they're going to be in really odd resolutions, which are not compatible with, or don't look good on a modern TV. So it's not much difference from having, going out and spending loads of money on a brand new gaming PC today. It's going to be very, very sort of a similar. It's just making the actual process of gaming sort of easier, really.
Yeah, and you'll have the advantage of, if you want it to be a console, it will just be a console. You never have to deal with a keyboard and a mouse, like, ever. But if you do want, like, me and my Steam Deck, I've got a bunch of old, weird, quirky games that aren't actually part of Steam that I've sort of it's not really side loading, but something like Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast, which was a game that you can't buy on Steam anymore. You have to get I've got an old DVD copy of it. So I had to I'd use another computer that had a disk drive. I had to rip the files from the disk, get a crack for it, so I could actually run the executable without it trying to look for the disk. So do that, and then put those files on like a USB stick, and then stick that in the Steam Deck. Go to desktop mode, make a little folder, stick them in the folder, and then point gaming mode, or add that game as a non-Steam game, then the executable. And then I can go into gaming mode and I can run it. And even then, Outrun 2006 has a launcher. So I had to go and fiddle with, do the button combination. You better use the trackpad in the launcher and change the resolution and hit enter, and then the game loads and it runs really nicely in game mode. But that's people like me like to do that. Whereas But your average Xbox gamer, I just want to play my Call of Duty, and that's an EA Sports, FC 20 whatever year will be on then. And you'll be able to do that, and it'll be just as seamless. But we can have that same device. We could be like, oh, cool, that means I can put Outrun 2006 coast to coast on it. I just need to, load up the desktop mode, stick the files in there, and things like that. I mean, another really thing that will be interesting is how will it handle like driver updates and security updates. I mean, Windows is a nightmare for that, isn't it? I mean, it tries to bundle them all into one, but it's difficult to time when they need to be installed, and how's that going to work? Steam does a pretty good job of it. It's like a kind of an iPhone update, really. It's no more invasive or intrusive than that. Yeah, that's going to be interesting.
Exactly. Yeah, that's going to be the sort of difficult part, and there's nothing worse than I like playing Call of Duty. We talked about that on here, but it's like, oh God, I haven't played it for a couple of weeks. Oh God, my shaders have come to compile. Oh,
yeah,
God.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's just like, well, I'll put it on now and I'll play in an hour or so, and that's something that's going to be a little bit unacceptable in sort of moving forward. And I mean, there's loads of different sort of things, sort of they really need to be doing to get a real sort of great, I think it's all about the user experience. How easy is it going to be?
Yeah.
What's the value proposition? And we talked about Game Pass. We've talked about access to Steam. We've talked about, imagine having a console where you've got access to 3 or 4 different game stores. And then that would give you sort of so much sort of flexibility. You go, oh, okay, well, I'll look over there, or I'll look over here, and oh, they've got a sale on at the moment, and that for me is a huge sort of selling point over the PlayStation. Where if it's not the PlayStation store, or actually the Nintendo, where if it's not on the Nintendo store, well, okay, well, I don't want to pay $49.99. There's no other option, is there? It's you buy it or you don't have it, and so having more option, and that's a really sort of the value proposition that hopefully is going to sort of come out of it, really. Yeah,
and it's going to be interesting. You could then, there is an argument where there's not much point in a PlayStation, it kind of loses its value a little bit, because you could have this new Windows Xbox, there's PlayStation games that are now on the PC that you better play on your Windows Xbox. You don't need to get a PlayStation. In fact, you're locking yourself out from the games that you can play on this Windows Xbox. You can play everything on this, apart from Nintendo. Nintendo are insulated from any of this, really, with their way they handle their own games. I don't think that'll ever change. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the opposite of what's happening now. Whereas all these Xbox games like Forza Horizon are coming out on the PlayStation, there's basically and Gears of War. There's no reason to have an Xbox, really. Get a PlayStation and you'll get whatever Xbox games that they're going to be putting out on it, and that's going to be more and more as time goes by. And the PlayStation games, you've got everything really on the PlayStation, but with this Windows Xbox, I keep calling it. This will basically flip that around a little bit. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that'll be if it'll the user experience that we keep banging on about is absolutely key to the whole thing. How seamless it is and how closely it matches what people are used to. They need to make sure they can bring over those sort of, like 30 or 40 million people that buy Xboxes. It seems to be around those figures. I think that these days they want to make sure they'll come over to whatever this new Windows Xbox is going to be, and potentially be able to bring more people on top of it. But clearly, if they're happy for the next Xbox to basically be a PC, they're not that bothered about selling hundreds, 100 million units of their own device. They kind of just want to get as many people using the Xbox, brand, or the Xbox side of Windows. That's kind of the units now that are kind of the user base. But kind of Game Pass really is more important than the boxes.
That's what Game Pass is. That's what Game Pass is. Xbox is Game Pass. They're not fussed about selling black boxes that are 200 mil by 300 mil, whatever they are. They're not interested in selling those, because in reality, that's going to be actually they lose £50. They want more and more people onto Game Pass, and whether or not that's through a handheld, that's through a PC, or that's through the new sort of Xbox sort of PC, or actually, what if Game Pass came to PlayStation? So you could access it on there, or Game Pass was on your phone, and there were games that actually only came out on the phone version of it, or over the cloud. There's so many sort of opportunities that they want to be sort of looking at, and I think is really sort of quite positive. What's going on, and fingers crossed it will all sort of work. It'll all be sort of seamless. And I think what the video game market needs is PlayStation innovating one way, Xbox is innovating another way, pushing games all in different directions, and it needs Nintendo doing Nintendo's thing, making great games over here, and it needs the mobile market. It needs everyone. You actually don't want everyone going, oh, the Xbox is rubbish, let's all go on to PlayStation, and then it's just PlayStation. And you want people pushing each other to actually, we want to offer a better value proposition than what Steam can offer. We want to offer, we want to offer more flexibility than PlayStation. PlayStation goes, oh, actually, we want to have better games than Xbox. And then everyone's, pushing forward to do sort of better things, and and going, oh, let's go into VR, let's go into this, let's go into that, let's make a really brilliant portable machine so you can play all these games when you're on the top of Mount Everest. That's what you want. It's no good having everything's dominated by one company. That's not a good thing.
No, absolutely not. And it will be interesting to see how, if this ends up being a successful model, would it essentially kill the traditional model of you bring out a subsidized, bespoke games console? If it is successful, Sony will start being, will Sony pull back on releasing games on the PC? Because it basically means their games are ending up on their rival's platform, thus sort of cannibalizing their own sales. Will they pull back on that and stop? It'd have to be, there would have to really be a dramatic change in the fortunes of how things have been going for that to occur. But will they be like, well, there's, we need to, they live and die by the fact that they've got a lockdown walled garden, basically, as do Nintendo. So if the Windows Xbox becomes massively successful, and sells, tens upon tens of millions of units, and is, obviously more successful than the last two gens of Xboxes, will that mean, what does that really mean for PlayStation? Like I said, they live and die by the fact that people will buy their console because they've got the games that you can only play on the PlayStation. If they're releasing them on Windows, therefore the Windows Xbox, what that devalues a PlayStation console. You never know. It could completely obliterate, the idea of a console. Sony might be like, well, maybe we should just, I don't know. I'm not sure what they would do. Would they just give up making consoles and maybe make their own kind of PC that runs Windows, but that basically is still Microsoft kind of winning?
Yeah. If I was Sony, I'll double down on, making great games, making a really good sort of powerful console, that can play these games, really great IPs, because, you've got to think about now that if you're around the world, if you want to go and buy, someone makes a decision, actually, I want to play, I want to spend £500 on a PlayStation 5. Okay, yeah, great. Get a PlayStation 5. Well, actually, they could go out and buy a PC for about that. And a PC, in my opinion, has got a much bigger sort of value proposition. And you get a slightly older graphics card. You could put it together. Maybe play a bit more. And so, you know, what we're talking about with Xbox is already really there with Steam, with Epic Games on PC. But people want a brilliant, you know, super duper machine under their TV with a great brand. And people are actually going, well, all my friends are on PlayStation. All I want to do is come home, play PlayStation games with my friends on PlayStation. PlayStation's absolutely great. And, you know, that's where my massive game library is. I love the Spider-Man games, the Horizon games. You know, I want to play those on PlayStation. And, you know, the next Last of Us, that'll come out first on PlayStation. That's what I want to play. And, yeah, and the PlayStation will still be the place to basically play that. And, you know, and it might be, you know, a sort of challenge for sort of Sony to overcome this. And again, with Nintendo, is like, well, hold on, you know, the Steam Deck probably costs a little bit less than the Switch 2. And there's 1,000,001 more games that are out for the, you know, the Steam Deck. Actually, the Steam Deck's probably more powerful, and there's so many sort of advantages of the Steam Deck. But people are still buying. Probably they've sold more Switch 2s than they have Steam Decks because of. Actually, they want to play Mario Kart. They want to play the new Donkey Kong game. They want to play the next Mario Odyssey. They want to play the next Zelda. They want to play all these games on there. And that's actually what they love to play. They love the sort of concept of it. And so I wouldn't sort of be concerned about, you know, there won't be a place for, you know, PlayStation. I think, you know, PlayStation will up their game. They'll offer, you know, a great service. They'll offer brilliant games. And, you know, the world will carry on.
Yeah, I think my sort of final point before we finish up this episode, Sony could double down. I mean, they might look at what Microsoft are doing, the Windows Xbox. I mean, we speculated that Microsoft might have some trouble getting that to be as cheap as a console currently is. I mean, they're not consoles aren't as cheap as they used to be, but the nature of it being basically a PC means they're going to struggle to get a good, you know, deal, and they're not really getting the money from the licensing to get you know, like you do for walled garden console models. So they're not going to get any money back from that. So yeah, they might end up needing to put the price up. Sony could see that as an opportunity. Well, they're not going to be able to get their, you know, again, this is completely, you know, speculation, but they're not going to get this Windows Xbox that we're going to be competing with is probably not going to be under £600, shall we say. So, you know, we're obviously going to keep we're making a, you know, a console that's just going to be a console like all of our consoles are. We can undercut them. We could make it cheaper. And yeah, okay, you know, we have released PlayStation games on Windows, and obviously now that's going to be an issue because that means we're making our games available on our competitors' console effectively. We can potentially keep doing that, but we can just restrict it more. You know, we can have a game come out 3 years after we release it on the PlayStation, on the PC. Yeah, obviously people might be a bit annoyed at us, but at the end of the day, you know, just get a PlayStation if you really want to play it day one. If you want to play Spider-Man 4, you know, and you've got a PC, you might have to wait 3 years after the PlayStation, which will make it, you know, which will really eliminate any direct competition or any real major argument someone could have where they could say, well, just get the Xbox, it will play the PlayStation games. It won't. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. And if they do double down and there is a bit of a price war, that would benefit all of us, really, because, I mean, also the games themselves will be interesting because, you know, well, I was going to say PC games tend to be a bit cheaper, but at the moment they kind of really aren't, are they? I mean, a game that's, you know, £60 on the console on Steam, it often ends up being about £60. I mean, I guess they have to pay Steam, you know, like 10%, 20%, whatever it is. 30, yeah. So it's probably about the same that they'd have to pay the license, you know, PlayStation to get their game on their console. So there's some justification there, perhaps. But you could potentially, you know, Microsoft could try and argue that the PC games are going to be cheaper, or the Windows Xbox games are cheaper than the PlayStation. Sony might think, right, we need to make our games cheaper then to stay in touch with them. Yeah, it's going to be interesting how it will kind of disrupt the whole console thing. I mean, Nintendo will just be in the background doing their thing. I think they'll come out unscathed. Unless their first party development takes a nosedive, which I can't see happening, because the quality of game developers they have there. I think they'll keep going on in the background, and they'll be just as successful as they have been. We kind of need them to be, really. They're the last bastion of. Well, Sony's been around now for a long time in video games, but from very near to the beginning of time in terms of video games, Nintendo are the only one that's really there, aren't they? So I think it's important that they keep doing what they're doing, and we love their games. So it's also important for that. But yeah, we'll just sit back and with a big bucket of popcorn and just see how it plays out. Be very interested to see what Microsoft do. Still interested to see if they are going to bring out a handheld that's not just this Roggly that's coming out. But that is also interesting because that's going to be our first taste of whatever this Windows gaming mode optimized version is going to be, and then that will probably give us an idea of what this new Xbox will end up looking like in 2, 3, 4 years time. So yeah, that's going to be very interesting when that releases. I think around Christmas time is when the Xbox Roggly. So anyway, Stu, where can you find us on the interwebs?
Well, we're everywhere, so search Console Shock on YouTube, search Console Shock on any podcast client, search Console Shock on Twitter. So anywhere where you sort of find any sort of social media, except for TikTok, just search Console Shock, you'll find us. So please also like, share and subscribe.
Absolutely, yeah. And we hope you enjoyed our speculations on what's going to happen with the Xbox and what it might look like in the future. If you've got any yourselves, you can just drop a comment if it's on YouTube. Let us know what you think, and as usual, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Take care.
S-Dog out.